And welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time. In this channel, we talk about books that we're reading. And currently, we are reading Neocolonialism by Kwame Nkrumah. We're currently in chapter 3. We have a little bit ways to go before we get into chapter 4. And the way that I structure this channel is that we start off by going over what we have learned up to this point. Since this channel is relatively new, I've been doing it every day for now a week. So today is my 5th day. And so I have been learning little by little on how to structure the channel. And what I'm realizing is because the book was written in 1965, things have changed. And so after, when I'm doing my my summary of what we have read, my notes of what we have read, I will also look up where we are today, some of the comparison of the things that we've read, because Kwame does go into detail. And so I wanted to see how much we have progressed. And we have learned quite a bit about how much there has not been much progress. Okay, so you never want to miss the beginning of the stream, because especially if you're new, because this is when we do the summary, but also when we do the updates of what has changed up since the book was published. And my name is Marielis. The reason that I started this channel is because I wanted to educate myself. I knew that I myself am a progressive, I'm a humanist person, humanism. I believe that people should have a living wage, that should have health care, there should be no homelessness, and all of these basic needs should be met. Those are things that I believe in, but we have a system right now in the United States that does not provide those things, and so I want to educate myself on what are other options, and the possible solutions, since we have always been put in obstacles in what the solutions actually could be in the United States. So again, a little bit about me. I am a Dominican American living in Norway. So I actually live in Norway now. But yes, that is basically a little bit about me. And again, we're going to go ahead and start with the summary up to this point. So up to this point, we know that our author was the Prime Minister of the Gold Coast. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and share with you my notes so that you can follow along with me. Okay, so these are my notes. If there are spelling errors, Microsoft should have caught that. Google should have caught that, but whatever. But basically, we learned that he was the first Prime Minister of the Gold Coast. He was educated in the United States and also in London. He was inspired by the civil rights movement, especially in New York City. And he helped Gold Coast get their independence from Britain and become Ghana. He was then the president of Ghana and also the prime minister and then president. In chapter 1, we learned that neocolonialism, what we have now, is actually worse than imperialism and the original form of colonialism. And the reason is because there's no responsibility. With imperialism and colonialism, you had settlements, there was responsibility, there was a closer attachment to the land and the people, and you had to go back and report how things were going back home. With neocolonialism, it's not your country. You're like hands off. You just have negotiations, contracts, and that sort of thing. With the neocolonialized territory. So then you can kind of avoid some responsibility there. So those are some things. Power nations don't always benefit financially. That's another thing that we learned in that chapter. It's mainly a position of power that they're trying to gain, power over the other, the other powerful nations of the West. So is having territory, having places where you can have your military base, having a control over resources that other nations might need for war and things like that. I'm going to skip over some of the things just because I want to make sure that we get to reading some things, and also these summaries are going to get longer and longer each time, so we're just going to kind of skip some stuff. So military aid is one of the ways that neocolonialist territories receive aid, and this is something that eventually is going to backfire, but the reason that they do it is so that they can protect their resources. So they basically tell the colonialized or neocolonialized territory, you can only use the aid that we provide you for this specific reason, which is basically protecting the resources, and a lot of that is military aid. But even when they give them any type of financial assistance, they always put regulations, and this is one of the reasons that the territories are not able to use the funds to maybe fund education or infrastructure or whatever the case may be, because there's this stronghold on what they can do with the funds. And another thing is that the neocolonialist powers know that this system of neocolonialism is temporary. It is not forever, but everybody that gets into power kind of just pushes the buck, and then it's going to land on someone eventually. But as long as it's not them, they're okay with pocketing the bucks, or pocketing the bucks. And so then we went into chapter 2, and in this book, obviously Kwame is going to focus mainly on Africa. He is an African president. He is deceased by now, but who he was. And so the example, because there are other examples of territories and countries that have neocolonialism in their political infrastructure and their economic infrastructure, but we're focusing on the African nations for this book. Anyways, and then he went into details about the African resources. So this is one of the places where I went back and started researching some of where things are now. And as you can see, we had 19%, Africa had 8% of the population when the book was published, and now they have 19% of the world's population. And here you see the numbers. 2% of the world's production, though. And that has not changed. In the 60 years since the book was published, they're still only producing 2% of the world's production. So no manufacturing, just resource extraction. They have the capability of producing 40% of 40% of their power from water power production, or the water power production capability. They have 40% of it. And they at the time of publication, they only used 5% of their capabilities. And to this day, it has improved very little. And it basically just doubled, which doubled sounds like a good thing, but it's only 11% while the population grew astronomically. So you can imagine how that feels. Let's see. Okay, Africa. If Africa used its own resources to develop itself to a complete modernized continent, if it used its resources, it can become the best viewers reach. Okay, it can become a completely developed nation or continent. But most of it goes to Europe, so that's no surprise. Finished products sold back to Africans at a fixed price, usually marked up, makes little from its own resources. One example was later in the chapter was Ghana and Nigeria and cocoa, and they produced a certain amount of tons in I think it was in 45, and then in 65, like 40 or 20 years later, they had doubled or tripled their production, but their income, what they've actually received from that, was less, like much less. So they're actually like basically making less money for way more production. Hey, Big Bunny, welcome back. Yes, so I'm just going through the summary. And this time I went ahead and made sure that I am sharing. And you see, thank you, thanks. But you see that now I got the pop-up chat. So I did my upgrading myself. All right. Per capita of countries is closely related to them. Okay, so this is the point that I made before, that they split the countries up into such small little parts that some of them are the size of a mid-sized European company. Yes, it is, and I can read it. I made it really big. Okay. Not a surprise, there are apologists in the neocolonial powers that urge the territories to focus on feeding their countries versus industrializing. Yeah, so this is one of the examples that he showed us about, like, people giving the propaganda messages, or the messages that keep the status quo. There's always going to be naysayers and apologists for the system as it is now. And when they see things like hunger in Africa, they're like, hey, just focus on that. And what we have learned in the book is that is a double-edged sword. Like, if you continue to only focus on farming and producing in that form, then you're never going to be able to produce enough food. You're always going to be kind of catching up, and you're still going to have the same problem. You're still going to need to ask for help and that sort of thing. Industrializing, manufacturing will help you produce the machinery that you need, and kind of solve the Nigeria and Ghana problem of producing more, but because they don't have the proper, upgrades in their the equipment that they need to do that, then it costs them more. So they actually make less money, even though they're producing way more. The bank system is another way that they trap the African countries. And you can read there what that is. I'm going to skip some of the stuff. Yeah, so there's the Ghana and Nigeria example. Africa needs to come together. So there we have the solution in the intro. Africa needs to come together for things to change. And it says that not even South Africa escapes the problem. I did look up to see, if anything has changed in South Africa. Yes, they have industrialized more. They're still the most industrialized company, but they still receive the majority of their financing from out of country. So they're still very, very vulnerable, and they barely do any manufacturing there either. So they might actually be better off when you go there and visit, but it's not actually. They're still very, very vulnerable to the outside world. How after selling their resources, Africans have to buy we already went through that. Okay, and then we went into chapter 3. And here, what are we talking about? Here we go into a little bit more specificity. And we talk about, specific ways that the countries are disadvantaged. The African countries are disadvantaged. And here we have an example that talks about the dividing of land into small country states, which we mentioned earlier, where we have like some countries have so little population that they can be compared to mid-sized companies. Spain and Portugal owning 19 separate West African countries, with each having an average of 2 to 3 million population. And they encourage them to have their own thoughts, their own system, their own everything, to worry only about themselves. They encourage this individualism because it makes it easier for them to get the advantage, because they know themselves also that a united Africa is one that you cannot mess with, basically. So they encourage this type of behavior. And then we have an example of Guinea at that time, where they decided that they weren't going to accept a contract that France was putting forward for several of the countries that they had this type of power over. And France punished them by taking away basically everything, every single support that they have, even the light bulbs. And that was an example that they talked about, and I thought it was incredibly petty. But this is how petty they are. They're just like, if you're not going to do what we ask, then you don't get absolutely anything. And so the other countries is basically to put fear on the other countries so that they don't do the same thing. But slowly but surely, the countries have been able to get out of some of those contracts because they're so inconvenient. But yes, it's like I said, it's about territory, it's about power. France didn't support humanitarian aid coming from America or China to some of their territories, even though they were going through, hunger and some other crises, because they felt that this is them trying to come in and be the power, have that soft power on those people. Because again, if you have that soft power, you can use that territory, you can use their people. There's always that security that you have. When it comes to things like war. Yeah, and so I mentioned here that some of the things that France did just made me sick. So I had to stop giving details. Okay, some history of treatment and obstacles to development and unity in Africa. So Portugal is a NATO country, but is also kind of seen, at least in the time, as a colonial territory. So it's part of NATO, but basically it's leverage, or what it has to give to the NATO ally is its territories. So if there's a threat of war, one member against another, or whatever the case may be, then, or even one member against somebody who's a country that is not a member, then you could always sweeten the deal with offering up one of Portugal's territories. So that's an obstacle, right? A terrible treatment, because you're basically a whole country is basically property. We learned that Rhodesia was example of British settlers comprising the majority of the government. Oh yeah, so this is what we read last time. So basically, Britain saw Rhodesia as basically its second Africa. South Africa. Sorry, it had settlers, British settlers, that made up the majority of the government. And they were told by Britain to have a majority Black people in the government so that they can be represented. And they were like, no. And therefore, they decided that they were going to not be a part of Britain and get their independence. That was what motivated Zimbabwe, because that back then it was still considered Rhodesia. When they decided to get separated from Britain, when they decided to become independent, it was the whites that decided that they wanted to be independent because they did not want to give, the majority to the Black people. So for sure. NATO is actually harmful to Africa and Caribbean and Latin nations. Yes. So they were like, no, we don't want to. We're going to get our independence. So I was like, yay. At first, when I saw the independence, I was like, yay, independence. But I was like, oh, no, that wasn't a good reason. But then eventually in 1980, it's when it became majority Black, and it became the Republic of Zimbabwe. So it eventually, in 1980, is when that happened. This is part of the example where I do some research after I finish my reading, so that I know the comparison of what's happened since. Western powers go to war for these neo-colonial territories. Yes. So they don't just have the territories as cherry on top of deals like they do with the Portuguese territories, but they also go to war for them And an example of it is here with Libya, which was first Spanish a very, very long time ago, Spanish territory. Then it became, in more modern time, became Turkish territory. And then the Italians wanted to go to war for the territory. Actually, I put here Spanish. It was actually Italian. This is Italian. So it was first Italian territory, then it became Turkish territories, and the Italian wanted it back. Then the France came in and they were trying to negotiate. This is like, the whole like allyship of countries. So France had an allyship with the Italians, and they were basically saying the Italians were like, you can have Morocco to the French if you let us have Libya. Don't get into this fight. And then they went into the fight with the Ottoman Empire, actually, instead of Turkey. Turkey is what it is now, or Turkey is what it is now. But anyways, so this is what happens to this territory. They have no say. The people are literally fighting for them, and they're just the people living their lives. The people in Libya talked to, I don't know the power structure at the time, but basically they pleaded with France to not let the Italians have their land because of the historical treatment that they had experienced. But then the French decided at the end that it was okay for the Italians to have the territory, because not only did they have Morocco, but there was like some other deal in the side that they wanted to like sweeten, wanted to like not have any more problems, blah, blah, blah. So the French, whatever, they acted like they were going to do something, but they didn't. So they of course don't even keep the promises to the people. Their votes, their opinions don't even matter. Libya did eventually get independence. Then it went into Britain, neocolonialized by the British. So there was, more of that. So this was during World War II, and then the British had a neocolonialist power up until like yesterday. So this is who basically killed Gaddafi. Gaddafi helped Libya actually get its real independence. And honestly, I don't know a lot of the story about like what happened during that period. All I know is that I don't trust the British. That is what I know. So if you have a guy that is trying to liberate the country, they have been tossed around like a piece of meat, like dog shit, basically. And then you have somebody that comes in and tries to liberate, and then there's wars that happen and, disarray. Just know that you're probably not getting the full story. That's all I'm saying. They also faced the obstacles of leaders who don't want to be independent. So then we have the bootlickers. We have some examples here of the Ivory Coast, which is Cote. I don't know how to pronounce the rest of that name, to be honest. So I have like an Achilles heel when it comes to French words, but I'll try. Devoida. Yeah. Anyways, so we have a couple of leaders here, and we have a Senegal president that died in 1980. This other guy was their president until 1993. So these are people that are pocketing money from France or from, where was this? I forget who. That was also France. Both of these are French territory, who have just been okay with these terrible deals, saying, hey, we're buddy-buddy, we're best friends, we are, we're one, we never want to be separated. Actually, that's it's not exactly a quote, but it's near a quote, what I was reading about the Leopold Sedar Senghor guy, because he actually helped Senegal get their independence. But after they got their independence, neocolonialized, because remember, that's what happens. After colonialism comes neocolonialism, and neocolonialism is always worse. So he was pocketing some big bucks up until he died in 1980, which, this is why progress is slowed down, because you have these fucking bootlickers. Help official independence. I just read that. Okay, so then we went over some solutions. Continental Economic Cooperation and Planning. We read that in last time. Trade and production, unification policies. Africa companies will have more space to grow. If you have this system, agriculture could be modernized. Larger scale industry can be planned. So these are some of the things. And then Kwame warns us in 1965 about U.S. investment and monopolies. I didn't research this because I was scared. I'm pretty sure that U.S. investments and monopolies were a big problem since that book was published. I will look it up for next time. So start modernizing agriculture. Oh, he says the order. So you start with modernizing agriculture, and then you move into electric power production, intra-country trade. Well, that would actually say there that it has increased. And then I looked it up, what it was in 1965. It was 5%, and now it's 16%, which is, dog shit. Has not increased. Remember, the population has increased a lot. It's always funny when you see... I don't know. Like, I do. This is just normal. I think what it is like I have this voice, and I guess this face, and it just doesn't look like I can curse, but I do. Other developments since the book was published. Okay, so these are just things that I looked up because I wanted to see what kind of things have improved since then. So we have the East African Community, the EAC, and it was founded in 1967. Oh, motherfucker, I actually just cut and paste this. I didn't read it. It collapsed in 1977. Okay, then it revived in 2000. Okay, so this is Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and others have common market with relatively free movement of people and goods. Okay, so it was revived. Kenya exports manufactured goods like cement, processed foods, and pharmaceuticals to its neighbors. Okay, so this is something. This was in 2000. It has been 26 years. So I wonder, it's probably still functioning just fine. West Africa, founded in 1975, 15 countries with a common passport and free movement. This is what I was talking about. Through trade barriers, though trade barriers still exist in practice. Yeah, this is what I was talking about, like the one passport that you can go to several countries. 15 countries is not enough, I don't think. And I do still think that I have seen influencers have issues because like all of the airports of these 15 countries are not 100% trained because not a lot of people hold these passports. And so they have had issues. And if this is the passport thing that I'm talking about. So that's, if that is what it is, then they still have some work to do. It's been 1975. All right, I'm going to have to research that a little bit. Southern Africa, founded in 1992, replacing, is that the other one? I don't know what SAD is. Okay, from 1980. SACU, originally founded in 1910, making it the world's oldest custom union. Okay. Yeah, so I guess that's not really anything. All right, so that is our review. I think my reviews are lasting half an hour. I think that's okay. Where should we go now? Should we go straight to the book, or should we go to watch some Instagram? Do you have an opinion? You don't have to type anything. I'll just choose for us. Okay, I'm gonna choose for us. Let's watch a Instagram thingy, and then we. I already decided. You're too late. I already decided. We'll watch one Instagram thingy, and then we'll go straight to the book.
If colonialism didn't always use slavery, and the colonizers paid their colonies for their resources, then how did the colonizers make so much money? How was colonization any different from just normal trade? Well, the strategy was a bit more subtle than we think, and we often hear vague terms like exploitation to describe it, because it's just really hard to explain it all in simple terms in only 2 or 3 minutes. But I'm going to try to. One core strategy was just that the colony could only buy goods from their colonizer, so you couldn't just shop around for the lowest price from a bunch of different countries. You had to accept whatever outrageous price your colonizer charged for any finished goods you needed, and you could only sell your raw materials to your colonizer, so you had to sell at whatever insanely low price your colonizer
So we're so smart now because we know this. We could have made this real.
demanded or not sell at all. Well, obviously that's not normal trade, so what if you just opt out? What if you just say, well, I don't really need money. I've got a farm, I've got some goats, some cows, I've got a home so I don't pay rent. I can live off of this, and we've been living like this for generations, so I don't need to play your game. I mean, how are you gonna force me to mine raw materials for a low wage when I don't even need a wage? Well, you do need a wage because you have to pay taxes. Sure, taxes have always existed, but you couldn't just pay your tax with your crops the way a medieval peasant could, for example. You had to pay it with some special currency. That's right, the colonizer's currency. Well, the main way you could earn these special fake pieces of paper was by working at one of the colonizer's companies. So yes, you will have to mine ore and work the plantation for an outrageously low wage because again, there's no competition. So maybe you say, okay, I'm forced to play the game and the game is rigged, but the game's not impossible. I'm not a slave, I can still buy and sell things. So I'm going to just work insanely hard, build up my savings, invest maybe into a factory which I own to produce finished goods, and compete with Britain's finished goods. Sure, I can only trade with Britain, but my finished goods will be so good that even British citizens want to buy from me, and I'll break free from this trap. Well, that's where strategy 3 comes into play, which is deindustrialization. India once had the highest quality textiles industry on Earth. Indian thread was manufactured so finely that it had no competitor whether from Europe or from China. So you think India broke free from this trap, right? Well, they didn't. Britain put an 85% tariff on Indian fabrics so they'd be artificially more expensive than British fabric. Pretty devastating when you can only sell it to the British. And if all that still wasn't enough, if you still had some savings left over, which did happen sometimes, the British could just increase taxes to suck it dry. The reason countries don't normally tax every spare penny you have is because your country wants you to use your savings to start productive businesses. Because that grows the economy, increases tax revenue more in the long run, and makes your country more powerful. But if Britain doesn't want you to start competitive businesses in the first place, then why would they bother with that? Britain simply had no incentive to leave you with anything more than the money you needed to feed yourself so you could keep being a productive worker, meaning you were enslaved in all but name. If colonialism didn't always use slavery,
Yep. Yeah, we knew this. I mean, I'm just glad other people are starting to know as well. Or honestly, I'm glad that we are starting to know as well. Yeah, I mean, as a person that is, cares about people and humanism and basic needs, it's hard to really see the perspective of somebody who is so willing to do this type of thing to people, to just extract, probably an extort, and basically slavery is just, to me, is just insane. Anyways, we'll just continue to read. Let's go into the book. All right, this is where we left off. I'm going to try, I didn't get too many clips this time of Instagram, or any news clips actually. So we're going to try to do as much reading as possible because we haven't done a lot of reading actually. I've realized that. So let's try to do that. All right, so let's start. And I will obviously stop it, whenever I feel like it, I guess. Economic unity, to be effective, must be accompanied by political unity. The two are inseparable, each necessary for the future greatness of our continent. and the full development of our resources. There are several examples of major unions of states in the world today. In Africa, if in Africa must unite, I described some of the more important ones and warned against the danger of regional federation in Africa. Africa today is the main stomping ground of the neocolonialist forces that seek the domination of the world for the imperialism they serve. Okay, so this kind of explains, my statements earlier, the perspective, domination of the world for the imperialism they serve. This is a bit random, but I really wondered if Meghan Markle knew her history and what Britain truly had done to our people if she would have still married into the royal family. I mean, I'm probably sure she would probably just say it's love, She met him at a party or something, connection with some, I followed it a little bit in the beginning. I think what it was, he saw her on TV, and then he contacted one of her friends or mutual friends, and then they went to like a get together, and then they got to know each other, and then they started dating. So I think it was like a personal thing like that. Yeah, love. I think it was like a personal connection like that, where it's just like, she's removing the, stuff from the man. And considering he's the one that approached her, if you have a prince approaching you, I mean, we are all selfish to a certain extent. And, if you tell me that I can marry a prince, I mean, it depends on a few things, but, I might say yes. I'm pretty sure I'll be pushing for yes. So I think it has to do with that, but I do hear what you're saying. Like, and you know what? She doesn't seem like she's a stupid or a dumb lady. I'm pretty sure she knows. It's just, the self-preservation is stronger. And I think in today's world, it's more about, money and power and fame. That's what really counts to a lot of people. So I wouldn't put it past her. I'm pretty sure she knows. Okay, Africa today is the main stomping ground of neocolonialist forces that seek the domination of the world for the imperialism they serve. Spreading from South Africa, the Congo, the Rhodesias, Angola, Mozambique, they form a maze-like connection with the mightiest international financial monopolies in the world. These monopolies are extending their banking and industrial organization throughout the African continent. Their spokesmen push their interests in the parliaments and governments of the world and sit on the international bodies that are supposed to exist for the promotion of world peace. This is NATO. And the welfare of the less developed countries. Against such a formidable phalanx of forces, I don't know what that means. How can we move? Certainly not singly, but in a combination that will give strength to our bargaining power and eliminate so many of the duplications that give greater force and greater advantage to the imperialists and their strategy of neocolonialism. So he's warning about this banking system, this financial monopoly that basically controls Africa, I'm pretty sure up to this day. Decolonialization is a word much and unctuously, I mean, you could always tell when I can't pronounce the word, used by imperialist spokesmen to describe the transfer of political control from colonists to African sovereignty. The motive spring of colonialism, however, still controls the sovereignty. The young countries are still the providers of raw materials, the old of manufactured goods. The change in the economic relationship between the new sovereign states and the erstwhile masters is only one of form. Colonialism has achieved a new guise. It has become neocolonialism. The last stage of imperialism, its final bid for existence. A long one, though. A long one, because I think it started around World War II, at the end of World War II, and it has gone on up until today. So it is a long tail, as monopoly capitalism or imperialism is the last stage of capitalism. What is the last stage of capitalism? As monopoly capitalism or imperialism is the last stage of capitalism. Very interesting. And neocolonialism is fast entrenching itself within the body of Africa today through the consortia and monopoly combinations that are the carpetbaggers of the African revolt against colonialism and the urge for continental unity. The interests are centered on the mining companies of South and Central Africa. From mining, they ramify onto an involved pattern of investment companies, manufacturing concerns, transport, public utility organizations, oil and chemical industries, nuclear installations, and many other undertaking too numerous to mention. Their enterprises spill across the vast African continent and over the ocean into North America, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, the Caribbean, South America, the United Kingdom, Scandinavia, and most of Western Europe. So these interests are centered on the mining companies of South and Central Africa. Okay. So basically, they control every aspect of all of their raw material. Okay. Phalanx was a body of heavily armored infantry from ancient Greece. So using it in a sentence like that is to give you the image of an unbreakable wall of sorts. Okay, thank you. Phalanx. Okay. Thank you. Connections, direct and indirect, are maintained with many of the giants of American industry and finance. They are supported by leading bankers, financiers, and industrialists in the United Kingdom, France, Belgium, Germany, America, and elsewhere. So basically, it's not neocolonialism like we had learned in the intro in the first chapter. Is not just having control by these nations, but it's also having control by these companies, these huge companies that basically have touched base on so many different continents and countries. These like financial monsters, monopolies. The rotas of their directorates are filled with names that have a familiar ring for those who have the least knowledge of international finance and industry. Names like Oppenheimer, Hambro, Drayton, Rothschild, De Langer. Rothschild have come into the surface lately. Landfund, Robiliard, Van der Straten, Hochschild, Chester Beatty, Patino, Engelhard, Timmins are ubiquitous. Others, equally powerful in the interests they dominate, avoid the publicity of lengthy lists of their directorships, either by complete absence from the pages of the directories, anxious to advertise their glories, or by coyly hiding their eminence behind a lonely announcement with their names and address. So they're scared. They're scared of being public because they know that eventually shit is coming. These intricate interconnections of the great imperialist monopolies expose the real forces that are behind world events. They indicate also the pattern which links those events to the developing countries at different points of the globe. They reveal the duality of the interests that force the developing countries to import goods and services which are the products of companies combined in the monopoly group, directly exploiting their natural resources or intimately associated with them. This is the double edge to the guillotine that cuts off Africa's wealth from Africa. to the greater enrichment of the countries which absorb her primary materials and return them to her in the form of finished products. God, could you imagine being a president of a country, a liberator, inspirational figure with so much knowledge, and you have to just watch. I mean, this is what my therapist. This is what my therapist. So now I go to therapy. One of the things that my therapist says is that ignorance is bliss, and the more you know, the more frustrated you become. The more your heart is broken, the harder life is, actually. But in my case, I think that the more you know, the more energized you are for change. So then, when the moment comes or the opportunity comes and you know and are ready and are energized to do what you have to do, what you can do in your position. In my position, I just think is doing this, educating myself with others. But yeah, so I think that there is a power in knowledge, but yes, it also does kind of suck. It does. Okay. In their newfound independence, it is to these very same monopolistic groups that the new African states are obliged to turn to supply the requirements arising from the need to lay the foundations for their economic transformation. The policy of non-alignment, whenever it is exercised, imposes the obligation to shop around. But since capitalism has come to the peak of monopoly, it is impossible for any of us to avoid dealing with monopoly in some form or another. And that was back then. Right now, we have 5 companies in the United States that run the country. We have 3 people that run our media. This is another reason why you have to educate yourself, because we are being propagandized like crazy. But it is in the nature of our arrangements with the monopolies that the freedom or otherwise of the African states lies. Where we establish and maintain the integrity of our financial situations and keep our basic projects free from imperialist control, we leave ourselves room to maneuver away from the neocolonialism that unfortunately has closed its grips upon countries whose independence is overshadowed by a heavy reliance upon extra African associations. Trust me, I wish I could be ignorant and stupid, because knowledge without power to change things does make life less rosy, but I can't stop myself from learning. And activities. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, we have responsibility. I'm in Norway. I still vote, in our American politics. My whole family lives there still. So I still care very much about what happens in the United States, but I also just care about what happens in the entire world. And I do think that the more of us know, the more of us stop trying to live in the rosy, the more we can change things, and they know that the more we know, the more they should be afraid, not talking about violence or anything, but just in general, there's other means. And that's why they're doing all of their, their shit, especially in the US now with all of the redistricting and all of that stuff. And the voter suppressions and taking basically the rights to vote from citizens, our power away. So, I mean, yeah, what can you do? You have to educate yourself, I think. Where did I leave off? Where we establish and maintain the integrity of our financial institutions, we keep our basic projects free from imperialist control. We leave ourselves room to maneuver away from the neocolonialism that unfortunately has closed its grips on countries whose independence is overshadowed by the heavy reliance upon extra African association. In this atmosphere of relative freedom, the giants combines that open up industrial enterprises on our soil, do so on arrangements that are well screened and are part of the Nationally planned advancement. The national banks are really national banks, formed and run out of the country's own resources, and our other financial and economic institutions are guarded against neocolonialist infiltration. So basically, he's saying, get all these financiers, get all these people, all of this foreign money out of our country. We don't need it anymore. And I think I mentioned something like this about like the fashion industry, and just the culture is dying because everybody's just it's just a terrible situation, right? Um, it's a big cycle, and I think that this is part of where the big guns, the leaders of these countries need to do the work so that the rest of the culture does not continue to die. People receiving all of this clothes aid, these recycled clothing, kill the culture, kill the colors, kill the material, kill the creativity. And if you continue down this line, you're not going to have any of that anymore. And you're supposed to, in my head, as you industrialize, as your country becomes more modern, you keep your culture, you just modernize it so that it is, appropriate, or whatever the case may be, or just even more beautiful because maybe you just couldn't afford certain things at a certain level. Instead, the cultures are just, this is lasting so long, people are probably also just losing the memory of the things that they build, that they create, and it's only a few people that are able to hold on to it because they understand the importance of culture. And I think that is very, very important and probably not spoken about as much. But it's you want to keep the country, you want to improve it, but you also want to keep the beauty of it. The black skin is beautiful. You can't obviously erase that. Well, you can definitely dilute it. But also the colors and the fashion and the languages and the dances, all of that stuff, you have to keep that, you have to protect it, and you have to have people that, hold on to it. But yes, here in that paragraph, he was talking about getting the money out of it and using your own. Unhappily, these conditions are rare in Africa. Most of the territory pass into the state of national sovereignty in unviable circumstances that inhibits even a modicum of free movement without national limits. They could be overcome, but only within the combined strength that continental unity and a central connective socialist policy free from attachment to other continents could give. He was really trying to isolate. He's like, fuck them. They have been screwing us over this whole time. Let's worry about us. The thing is, they always get jealous. So there's another problem there. So you have to build your military as well. Anyways, that's my opinion. As things are, most of our new states alarmed at the prospects of the harsh world of poverty, disease, ignorance, and lack of financial and technical resources into which they are thrust from the womb of colonialism, are reluctant to cut the cord that holds them to the imperialist mother. Their hesitancy is fostered by the sugared water of aid, which is the stopgap between avid hunger and the hoped for greater nourishment that never comes. As a result, we find that imperialism, having quickly adopted its outlook to the loss of direct political control, has retained and extended its economic grip, and thereby its political compulsion, by the artfulness of neocolonialist insinuation. The increasing expansion of production capacity and potential output of the advanced capitalistic countries has its corollary in the necessity to export on a geometrically increasing scale the finished products of industry and the excess capital that could only further inflate competition at home. but brings rapid and high return from the industrial-starved new nations. Hence, the fevered jostling of position in these areas as well as in that of raw material monopoly, which is using Africa as a playground, not only of the Cold War, an aspect of the fight of capitalism for existence against socialism, but of the competitive struggle of international monopoly. North America imports into Africa rose from 10.3% to 10% in 1959 to 13.7%. I think that's what that means. In 1962. While those from other Western countries and Japan remained the same or declined slightly. This corresponds to the increasing American investment in the continent's extractive industries and the growth of United States participation in financial establishments on this continent. American banking houses are making inroads into territories formerly centered for solely by European and British banks. The French banks still dominate in the former French colonies and the Belgium in the Congo, but this is frequent a front of American participation. So what it's saying here is that North America imports into Africa. So the African is not basically importing. Does that make sense? North America imports into Africa rose from 10.3 to 13%, while those from other Western countries like Japan remained the same or declined. So they're not importing as much, I guess. And the reason has to do with American investment. All right, let's read more. Let's see if we understand better. European financial advisors constantly consult the African countries on the advantages that they can receive from remaining in association with the Eastwell mother country, while depreciating the possibilities of inter-African association. Much subtly is employed by Lombard, the commentator of the Financial Times. In an article which appeared in the issue of 6 February 1964 of this influential London newspaper, a product of an industrial holding company which also produces the Economist, Lombard asserts that there is not much that African countries can do directly to help one another financially at this stage of their economic evolution. He is therefore glad to see that the independent African countries are now coming to recognize that it is very much in their own interest to preserve the monetary ties with leading European countries they inherited from their colonial days. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the advice. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, definitely continues to benefit you guys, for sure. They obviously entertained strong suspicion that the enthusiasm their old mother countries were displaying for allowing them to remain within their monetary areas was, that was a lot. Yeah. Was motivated largely, if not wholly, by consideration of self-interest. There you go. And they are inclined to assume that this implied that their own purpose would be served best by following up political independence with its financial equivalence at the earliest possible opportunity. All right, so I think what I got from the imports into Africa part, I think what I got from that is that there isn't a lot of imports because they have to basically buy everything from their mother country. I think that's what I got, but maybe we'll learn differently. And also there's the financial aspect of it, which I think ties into who they can buy from. Lombard assured his readers that the Africans showed wisdom when the Secretariat of ECA assisting the Organization of African Unity to implement its resolution on the possibility of establishing an African clearinghouse, and Payment Union had the good sense to seek the advice of the distinguished American monetary authority, Professor Triffin of Yale University. Need we be surprised that in his report, the distinguished American professor pointed out that it would be most unwise lightly to condemn or break up financial arrangements with major trading companies and financial centers. This, of course, we might consider neocolonialist penetration. I'm so immature. Every time I hear penetration or read it, But to Lombard, it is only one side of the picture. For there are two worlds, and the African countries should now strive the best of both worlds by maintaining and even further developing the relationships they have with the major international monetary areas, and at the same time building their own financial self-help mechanisms. How is it possible to resolve two contradictions? Lombard does not volunteer to explain. But what he does confess is that this unresolvable two-way procedure would meet with nothing but the fullest approval from their African present monetary area association. So they make things, they propose something that is relatively impossible. And then they, 12-year-olds, I do, it's so stupid. So they basically propose this like impossible proposal for Africa to do better for itself, but they don't offer any, realistic ways for them to get there because it's a trap. That's why you're in a cycle, and they don't want to recognize that they're putting the countries in the cycle, but they know it. They do know it. Because there's no way that this guy, this president, knows it, and they don't. They just, convince themselves that the status quo, as long as things are good, then things continue to be good. And why are you fighting the good? Things are good for me. This says plenty, and we have no difficulty in believing what it says. For the simple fact is that those who control the major international monetary areas are placing their time bombs within the self-help mechanism of the African countries. For these mechanisms are controlled by the financial monopolies of imperialism, the bankers and financiers who have been very busy in the past few years setting up establishments throughout Africa, infiltrating into the economic heart of many countries and linking with the most important enterprises that are being established to exploit the continent's natural resources on a larger scale than ever before their own private gain. Yeah, I think like a lot of these professors and stuff are looking at things from this like high level without looking at these contracts and these internal, what's actually happening in these countries, like looking at the details. They're just like, well, if you just like take a little bit from both, you help yourself a little bit, and also you take assistance from the neocolonial powers, then you're going to like figure it out just slowly but surely. But it's a trap. They don't want to face it, or they don't want to look deeper into it. The fact that there is no way for them to get out of that. Though the aim of neocolonialists is economic domination, they do not confine their operations to the economic sphere. They use the old colonist methods of religious, educational, and cultural infiltration. Don't get me started on this. For example, in the independent states, many expatriate teachers and cultural ambassadors influence the minds of the young against their own country and people. They do this by undermining confidence in the national government and social systems through exalting their own notions of how a state should be run, and forget that there is no monopoly of political wisdom. Not only that, there's also a process to becoming a developed nation. There are hardships, there are difficulties that a country must go through, and if you educate their people to think that they can just have it if their government would just give it to them, then you're creating a situation that you are doing on purpose so that there can be revolt. But all this indirect subversion is as nothing compared with the brazen onslaught of international capitalists. Here is empire, the empire of finance capital. In fact, if not in name, a vast sprawling network of intercontinental activity on a highly diversified scale that controls the lives of millions of people in the most widely separated parts of the world, manipulating whole industries and exploiting the labor and riches of nations for the greedy satisfaction of few. Here resides the mainspring of power, the direction of policies that stand against the advancing tide of freedom of the exploited people of Africa and the world. Here is the adamantine enemy of African independence and unity, braced in an international chain of common interests that regard the likely coming together of the new nations as a major blow at its continued domination of the resources and economies of others. Here indeed are the real workings of neocolonialism. Here indeed are the economic ramifications of the monopolies and combines. Their financial and economic empires are Pan-African, and they can only be challenged on a Pan-African basis. Only a united Africa through all African Union government can defeat them. Okay, so let's take a break here and watch a video. We've made it to chapter 4. Are we angry enough yet? I was angry before the book started. Neocolonialism by Kwame. Yep. Okay, imperialist finance. I feel like we've already kind of been tapped into imperial finance. So let's go back to our Instagram and see what other video. Let's like this one. Let's see what the heck this one is about. Okay, again, I don't necessarily know if these videos are going to be, related to what we're reading. I just kind of see the first second and then I'm like, yeah, maybe. In the words of Bruce Banner, I'm always yeah, basically. Oop. Let's refresh this.
Go State of the World, 90 seconds. Why in the world does anyone who's not a billionaire defend capitalism? It literally means you want billionaires to get richer while the rest of us suffer increasingly. Let alone the fact that infinite growth on finite resources is not logical, it's synonymous with colonialism, and at the top, the stock market is a gambling game that we fund for those who have too much. Profits are privatized while we pay for the loss. Get your head out of your ass and join the resistance. Speaking of resistance, a fleet of ships carrying humanitarian aid to Gaza was attacked off the coast of Greece by a genocidal entity who gives zero fucks about any kind of international law and have now kidnapped humanitarians to interrogate, torture, and imprison without any kind of real legal process. The same entity whose Minister of National Security turned 50 and was gifted a cake by his wife with a noose on it reading "Dreams do come true" to celebrate the new apartheid death penalty law. The same entity annihilating Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Iran, erasing entire peoples while the world doesn't just do nothing, actually enables them. Continue.
The reason that they enable them is because they also did it. They also did it. All of them. They all also did it. That's why. They're just like, okay, it's just not our turn right now.
The same entity where 82% of people believe ethnic cleansing is the path to peace, tries children through military courts, directs spies like Epstein all over the world, and celebrates soldiers who rape prisoners. Yeah, it's Israel, by the way. Supposedly a totally normal society.
Okay.
Bastion of democracy and peace in the Middle East. Totally normal. They're still playing Eurosong. Cool. Cool. Oh, and
Oh, is there more?
guys, if you like my work and you want to support me, you can...
Yeah, let's go ahead and like this. Let's see what else I have here. For the black man, there is only one destiny, and it is white. Interesting. Should we watch that one? Let's see. If it looks like it's going to be too long, I'm not. I'm going to go back to reading, but let's see.
Black man, there is only one destiny, and it is white. This is what the colonialism psychiatrist Frantz Fanon wrote in his provocative book, Black Skin, White Masks, highlighting the effects of racism on black people. When he says the only destiny is becoming white, he's arguing that colonial societies equate whiteness with superiority and blackness with inferiority. As a result, many colonized people internalize these values and come to see acceptance, success, and humanity as only achievable by aspiring to a white existence. This is impossible and damaging. Black people can never be accepted as white. This reinforces the very racist hierarchy.
It's kind of like the suggestion, like just take a little bit from the colonial powers and then help yourself. But like if you don't look deeper into it, if you just like avoid, if you just see it from the top and you don't look deeper into it, then it's possible, right? This is what you're supposed to do. Take a little bit here, take a little bit there, but it's impossible. You're given an impossible solution to a very, very real problem. So I guess that's kind of like this. It's like that there's white supremacy. We can continue to improve ourselves. We can continue to go up the ladder depending on different things. Unfortunately, we will never get to the top because that is impossible. We can't change our skin color.
That devalues them. Fanon also criticizes attempts to reclaim pure black identity, stating that these ideas still rely on racial categories created by colonial racist thinking. For Fanon, both assimilation to whiteness and romanticization of blackness fail to overcome racism. True liberation, he argues, requires moving beyond racial frameworks altogether and demanding recognition based on shared humanity rather than skin color. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. For the black man, there is...
All right. Wonderful. Yeah. Are we having fun? All right. Let me stop become positive. Go back to reading. Lord, it's hard to be positive. All right, let's go back. Okay, imperialist finance. These are the hard facts of the African situation today, a process that has continued and grown since the invasion of Africa by the European and foreign powers. It has gained tremendous momentum in recent years with the growth of the struggle between the imperialist antagonists and between capitalism and socialism. Imperialism was analyzed by Lenin as the highest stage of capitalism. His exposition was written in the middle of the First World War, 1916, which was waged to determine the first major revision of imperialist supremacy. He traced the unequal development of capitalism, which caused the latecomers like Germany and the United States to form into cartels and syndicates before the earlier starters, and so brought them sooner to a higher stage of monopoly from which they challenged each other and the rest of the world imperialism. Okay, so it's good. We have new powers that get to come into the game. Monopoly capitalism by means of mergers, amalgamations, patent agreements, selling arrangements, production quotas, price fixing, and the variety of other common contrivances had built itself into an international confraternity. However, because of its competitive character rooted in the principle of production for private gain and the unequal development of capitalism, the struggle of the monopolies went on within the international combinations. The conflicts between the European and the American financial and industrial trust and combines for a redivision of the world's resources of raw materials and markets for investment, capital, and manufactured goods exploded into war when they became too intense to contain within the limits of diplomacy. The 1914-1918 war brought a redivision of the globe's colonial sectors. At the same time, it created the opportunity for a socialist break in the chain of imperialism that encircled the world. A heavy blow was dealt to international monopoly capitalism with the triumph of the Russian October Revolution. From then on, it was faced not only with the struggle for hegemony within its own ranks, but, which was much worse, it was forced to engage in a defensive struggle against an opposing ideology. The ideology had achieved a single success in withdrawing a sixth of the Earth's surface from monopoly capitalism field of operations, a fact which it has never and will never forgive, and was threatened to undermine imperialism power at other strategic spots which had softened under the blows of war. With the failure of interventionist war to subdue the new socialist state, a carbon sanitaire was raised around the Soviet Union to prevent the spread of socialist contamination to other parts of Europe. Fascism was encouraged to prop capitalism at points where it had been seriously damaged and was faced with popular discontent, as in Germany and Italy, and to bolster it in those outputs which were and remain semi-colonial appendages of Western imperialism, Spain and Portugal. This is very interesting. It lets us know that the real problem with the Russia and some of these other countries are that they basically removed their people, their population, that portion of the world from the grasp of imperialism. And this was the blow to them. It's all about power and control, and they don't want these different ideas to spread. I mean, we kind of knew that that's what this all was about in small ways, but to be presented in this way, where it's like, there's all the details that we've been propagandized to believe, all of the horrors of these countries that have these other systems, but we're not really addressing the horrors, first of all, that we are doing in our imperialistic neocolonialist ways. We're not really discussing that. If we were to compare ourselves, really, the way that we talk about those countries, and we were to actually compare ourselves to them, then I really wonder who is the evil one. I don't think I wonder that. I think I don't wonder that. I just don't, I think I've been so propagandized, so whitewashed into this capitalistic colonial system through our education system, and also through all of the threats that, this is being streamed and everything, that we don't want to say that maybe the countries that we call the bad guys of the world maybe are not. Maybe they have, bad guy leaders or leaders that pose as bad guys, but we make them look much worse than what they are. We are killing so many people right now in the worst ways. And what is North Korea doing? Not letting their people see the world. What is actually happening in there? We don't really know. Like that's what they're doing. Whatever they're doing to their people is what they're doing. But what are they doing to the world? I think the answer is nothing. I think that's the answer. But whatever. I don't know. I'm just reading a book. Okay. These devices, however, were unable to cope with the recurrent crises that were tearing at the very heart of capitalism and sharpening the bitter contentions between rival imperialism, which erupted into a second global war in 1939. Also, those bad guys, leaders, are usually put into power by the West. Basically. But then if they don't continue, then we take them out. Because nobody can be badder. We're the biggest and the baddest. Okay. From this Holocaust, socialism emerged as a much more threatening challenge to imperialism than was before. At the same time, we, the peoples of imperialism, far-flung empires, had come to realize that we could have control over our own destiny and began to make our bid for independent nationhood. Those imperialisms came to be challenged on another front, the colonialist front, at a time when science has heightened the capabilities of the production of machinery of capitalism, thereby increasing its need for raw materials and markets for new chemically produced primary materials, manufactured goods, and overseas employment of growing capital surpluses. Challenged thus by anti-colonialism and socialism, imperialism is now engaged in a to-the-death trial for survival against the forces that are antagonistic to it and that are building up across the globe, even while the internecine struggle within itself is becoming more and more brutal. In this multi-sided struggle, imperialism has been forced into the use of many artifice to maintain itself in being by continuing the colonialist process without the benefit of colonial control. Therefore, neocolonialism. So still benefiting though. The great colonial powers were able to monopolize external trade and agriculture and industrial primary materials production in their prospective subject territories. The colonies of such a lesser industrialized nation as Portugal, however, which has for centuries has been a pawn of Britain and become a semi-colony of British finance, were dominated by British capital, together with the international banking groups with which it is associated. Up until this book, I did not know or see Portugal as being kind of a colony, a semi-colony of British, because they had basic control or financial control of them. I had no idea about that. I'm going to look into it a little bit. Okay, Belgium financial domination of the Congo because of the close connection of the Belgian banking institutions with such international houses of Rothschild, Lazard, Frères, and Schroeder in their turn linked with the Morgan and Rockefeller groups was shared with British, French, and American finance. The tribute drawn off by way of colonial and semi-colonial exploitation enabled the capitalist classes of the metropolitan countries to pass some of the crumbs to their working classes and thereby buy them off, especially the trade union and political leaders. When the class conflicts in their societies got critical, at the same time, the competition for sources of raw materials and the export of capital and commodities intensified as production methods improved and goods came out of the factories on a more and more massive scale. Yeah, this is what he was talking about in the introduction, when he was saying that neocolonialism was birthed during this time where the African countries were starting to get the idea of getting this liberation, and once they get enough sovereignty and just enough independence, then it becomes harder for the neocolonialist powers to continue their stronghold on it, and that's why they needed to turn, because they couldn't fight two wars at the same time, because they were at the same time basically choking their own societies. And the gap between the rich and the poor in their own societies was so huge that they had a fight at home. They had to slightly improve the situation for the people at home. And they had to kind of focus on that. They couldn't, because it costs money to do war and to try to keep these colonies and that sort of thing. And you have to get people to go to war. And if your people are not on your side, nobody's going to fight for you. So that's part of the reason that it went to from this colonial aspect to neocolonialism, where you have the paperwork and maybe you have some military presence, but it's just to protect the resources that go back to the home, to build in the factories and da-da-da-da. So yeah, just tying some things together from the introduction. Okay, the uneven development of capitalism brought new contenders into the field who joined in the rivalries that had grown up with the original scramble for colonies. These deepened until they erupted in the two world wars, which, notwithstanding all the pious claptrap about there being wars fought for the maintenance of democracy, were in reality wars fought for the redivision of the world by monopoly and capitalism. Wars, Clausewitz has told us, is the continuation of policy by other means. What the powerful trusts were unable to achieve by peaceful competition, their domination over larger and larger areas of the world, they embroiled their countries into military action to achieve them. This not only gives them a wider sphere of exclusive operation, but undermines the power of competitive monopolies. Yeah, so if they can't do it the easy way, if you don't just accept all this unfair, things that we have, all these unfair agreements, then we go to war. And so that is the real reason we have enemies. America and some of these bigger countries have enemies, and have the bad guys and the good guys is because of this. They want to continue to have this power. And probably the reason that they still have the power in Africa is because, you need money to fight wars. So Africa has just been in an unfortunate chokehold. This redivision of the world is not confined to the less developed sectors, but extends to highly industrialized areas. The important industrialized region of Alsace-Lorraine was a coveted prize of the German invasions of France in the wars of 1871 and 1939. Hitler's campaign against Czechoslovakia was inspired by the desire to annex the highly developed manufactories of Bohemia and Moravia to the German trusts. French capitalists long looked with watering mouths at the rich coal mines and chemical and other industries of the Saar, so close to the iron ore range of Lorraine, and seized the opportunity of the 1919 peace arrangements to appropriate them to French as a reparations award. This is very interesting, I think, because you think of when you think of Hitler and all that he did, you think of it being purely because of hate. Again, not again. For the first time, I'm not defending Hitler in this statement. I'm not even defending any of the bad guys. I'm just saying we're also bad guys. But this actually just goes to show that a lot of this expansion had to do with resources, not so much with these ideologies that we think of. It's also to do with those things as well. A later plebiscite won the Saar back to Germany. After the Second World War, agreement between the D. Wendell Schneider-Krupp Trust achieved a customs union between the German state of the Saar and France, which actually makes the Saar a dependency of the D. Wendell Coal and Steel Empire. World War II ended in the defeat of Hitler and a temporary rebuff to German capitalism, which had to submit to a revitalization injection of American monopoly finance. At the same time, an upheaval was taking place in the colonial world, such as to make Winston Churchill remark that he had not been made Prime Minister of Britain to preside over the liquidation of the British Empire. All the fair, brave words spoken about freedom that had been broadcast to the four corners of the earth took seed and grew where they had not been intended. Colonial emancipation became the dominating phenomenon of the mid-20th century, just as abolition of slavery of the corresponding period of the 19th, with just a crucial consequence in national and international politics and economics. This is interesting. So, I don't know. Sometimes I'm afraid to give my opinion, but he was a racist. Winston Churchill was, but sometimes you extract those historic statements from the person and you build inspiration, you make it work for you. I think that's kind of what he was saying here. Post-war capitalism, which had already received one devastating blow after the First World War, in the rise of the Soviet Union, took another crushing defeat in the establishment of socialist regimes in a number of countries in Central and Eastern Europe and in China. Large sources of raw materials and financial investment and commodity markets were withdrawn from its field of exploitation. Domestic reconstruction at first occupied the attention of the European countries, the United States having already achieved a tremendous head start by its late intervention into the war, its physical immunity from attack, and the enormous splurt given to its production and inventive capacity as the main supplier of war materials and services, took over from Britain the leading role in international financial monopoly. So Britain did lose the power. I mean, we already know that. Okay. As a result of its primary in the financial sphere, United States foreign policy turned in a completely opposite direction from its pre-war position of splendid isolation to one of domination in world affairs. The outcropping of new states from colonial submergence raised the pivotal problem of how to retain these countries within the colonial relationship once open control was removed. Thus has opened up a new phase in imperialism, that of adaptation of colonialism to the new condition of the elimination of political overlordship of colonial powers, the phase in which colonialism is to be maintained by other names. It became too much trouble to have colonialism. So now we have, what do we have? Let's see. This is not to say that the old outright form of colonialism is completely scrapped. There is plenty of evidence to show how tenaciously imperial powers cling to their colonial territories. Vietnam, Korea, Suez, Algeria are all examples of how far imperialist nations will go to hold on physically to colonies, an attitude reinforced by the interference of America as a leading protagonist in the struggle for the world monopolist control of financial control. This struggle has been given an ideological content by invoking anti-communism as the mainspring of the battle to bring the socialist sector of the globe back into the exploitative control of Western financial monopoly. Cuba is the outstanding example of the extremist lengths to which these power groups will go in the effort to reimpose their grip where they have been ejected, and to maintain what they consider a strategic bastion in the struggle for the renewal of dominion over the socialist anti-imperialist war. Yeah. Cuba, poor Cuba, is going through it again. They don't get a break. Okay. I mean, I hate FDR for his ethnic cleansing of Mexican Americans and rejection of the civil rights movement. But the line, "We have nothing to fear but fear," is go hard. For sure. You have to extract, you take the good and you push out the person. Okay, we're going to take a break. Yeah, you're welcome. Castilli 34, thank you for coming. I'm going to take a break, take a drink of water, and let's watch a video. Let's watch something. What did I don't remember everything that I actually put in here. So let's see. Okay. I'm still kind of slow, so again, this is my first week, so all right. Let's see what this guy says.
Liberal or a centrist might agree with you that capitalism is destroying the planet, but then they'll look you dead in the eye and say, well, just show me one place in which socialism has ever worked. This is a rhetorical challenge naturalized by 75 years of propaganda. It feels earnest to the people who utter it. And the standard response from Marxists could be better. Often, it's merely to flip the question. Show me one place in which socialism has been allowed to flourish free from attack. I believe a better strategy involves showing why capitalism makes it impossible to know important things, like how socialism is working or not working, and then to give a concrete example, like this one. In September of 1973, Augusto Pinochet was installed as leader of Chile via a CIA-backed military coup. Now, before the coup, Santiago was South America's most concentrated site of radical left intellectual production. There were 5 think tanks in the city that hosted an international network of Marxist economists and sociologists who had an amazing lab at their disposal because they were working in dialogue with Salvador Allende's socialist government. Santiago was a research hub for scholars from North America and Europe, and Latin American scholars shared their findings abroad. They were working on something called dependency theory, which described how wealthy nations developed through colonialism, but then underdeveloped their former colonies through debt, forcing them to send surplus back to the core. Pinochet destroyed this research ecosystem. Research centers were closed within hours of the coup. Researchers were killed.
Yeah, this is... I laugh because it's the same shit every time. This is the good guys, by the way, guys. This is the good guys. The good guys are doing this. As soon as you have something that goes against the propaganda that they have been feeding us, it's time to kill. It's time to close. It's time to war.
Imprisoned or scattered across Mexico, Europe, and Latin America. He appointed retired military goons as rectors of universities. Troops tear-gassed campuses, violently arrested students, and destroyed lab equipment. Then there's the case of Orlando Letelier, a Marxist economist and diplomat under Allende. After the coup, he fled to Washington, D.C., where he worked in academia until 1976, when agents of Pinochet's secret police killed him in D.C. with a car bomb. This was one of the first foreign state-sponsored terrorist attacks on American territory because a CIA-backed right-wing dictator didn't like this guy's research on the flow of capital in Chile. So if you give an example like this, it still might feel remote to the centrist. But then you can say, capitalists and fascists never want people studying what's happening. Have you heard of all the medical, environmental, and climate scientists Trump has shit-canned? And they might recognize this because many pride themselves on being well informed. So you can show that capitalists don't want people to know important things. They don't want anyone to know how socialism works, just like they don't want anyone to measure rises in disease.
All right, it's frozen, but you guys can still hear it.
Atmospheric heat. And if you really want to drive the point home and level it up, you can ask, do you know how many journalists the IDF has killed in Gaza? And the answer is, basically all of them. So a liberal or a centrist might agree with you that capitalism is destroying the planet, but then they'll look you dead in the eye and say, well, just show me one place in which socialism has ever worked. This is a rhetorical challenge.
All right. Yeah, basically. Okay, yeah, you can still hear. Yeah, they're stealing our light bulbs for sure. That is a good saying. I mean, seriously, that was petty as hell from France. That was petty as hell. But yes, learning about this stuff can be dangerous too, I imagine. But they just don't want anybody to spread this information. They don't want people to spread to kill their propaganda. Yeah, I mean, I just started. I don't fear anything. Also, yeah, I'm whatever. I don't think about that stuff. But all right, let's go back to the reading. So far, the clips have been pretty on point. Let me like this guy. I don't want to forget. All right, let's get back to the book. Where are you? Here. All right. Control of fuel resources is a prime motivator in the frantic competition between monopolies. The Tsar was bandied between France and Germany because of its important. I'm like, sorry, I just had to stop for a second because I'm starting to realize how I read because I'm reading to you guys. Different than when I think I do it probably when I read on my own as well. But when I don't know a word, I just like turn my head like a dog, like when a dog doesn't understand something. Oh, God. I can't even fake it sometimes. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, the Tsar was bandied between France and Germany because... yes, you did. Yeah, well, you will know by the end of this how big my vocabulary is. Maybe you'll grow some. Because of its important coal resources. Now I can't stop thinking about it. All right, stop. Similarly, the battle for oil has gone on since before the First World War. Middle East oil, in fact, became an important objective of the war. And the struggle continued after the war by diplomatic and economic means inside the national boundaries and on the international plane. Rockefeller's supremacy in oil has been stoutly contested by the Morgan groups, which have extended their influence by breaking into the Anglo-Dutch holdings. One-time preserve of the Rothschilds, Lazar Freres, the Deutsche Bank, and their associates. The frenzied battle for oil monopoly has been a cardinal factor in the suppressions of popular movements in colonial and semi-colonial areas of the Near, Middle, and Far East in Latin America and North Africa. The series of events in Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Aden, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Venezuela, Brazil, and Algeria have erupted in violence and still do. Revolution and war have been largely simulated by the struggle for control of oil. Oil finds in European centers. So whenever you think about Muslims, just think it is just propaganda. I mean, I hope that you would know that if you're listening to me, but it's always been about oil. Oil finds in European centers such as Groningen in Holland have drawn the competition into well-industrialized centers, just as the competition for coal and iron did. Competition between the oil combines is not confined to production, but extends into the distribution of petroleum products and the new byproduct industry of petrochemicals. A fierce struggle is going on all over the world as a result of the sharp increase in the quantity of oil consumed and the territorial expansion of consumption. The oil industry has, from its outlet, been dominated by the most powerful banking interests, the Rockefellers, Morgans, Rothschilds, because of the spiraling profits it provides. Today, even with the larger royalties and oil combines have been obliged to pay to the oil-producing countries, their profits are still mounting prodigiously. Okay. Oil trust reserves run into billions. Much has been used in investments abroad, America far and away exceeding all others. To financial reserves from oil must be added those amassed from metal and other raw materials monopolies. From monopoly of food supplies and vast industrial and agricultural empires, from military preparations and the several wars that have been fought with colonial peoples since the end of the Second World War, from the development of nuclear instruments of destruction and the frenzied race for leadership in the realm of space leadership, which is a crock of shit right now. But whenever I thought about Rothschilds and some of these other super billionaires, I never really put two and two together of like where they got their money from. And so now I know it's all of these motherfuckers, all of these fucking billionaires, these super billionaires, are just, they've just been doing a lot of this exploitation and taking advantage of the injustice and the trap that the African continent has been facing, and other continents and other countries as well. So this is just the example of probably one of the ones that have suffered the most, I'm not going to lie. Capitalism contains many paradoxes, all of them based in the concept of commodity production. The few rich and the many poor, poverty and hunger amid superabundance, freedom from hunger campaigns and subsidies for restrictions of crop output. But perhaps the most ludicrous is the constant traffic in the same kinds of goods, products and commodities between countries. If it's not from Africa, it's Latin America or the Caribbean. For sure. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue before the anger overwhelms me. Okay. This is not done out of need. Everyone is busy, as it were, taking in the other's washing. This is not done out of need, but out of the compulsion of profit-making and monopoly extension. The European common market has become the apotheosis of this process, as well as the dumping ground of international investment, dominated by the giant American banking concerns and their British satellites. The European community, of which the European common market is only one aspect, and the British, who have just selected a bunch of races, just wanted to throw that in there, is by no means a new concept. It was foreshadowed by Hobson in his critique of imperialism as a European federation of great powers, which so far from forwarding the cause of world civilization might introduce the gigantic peril of Western parasites, a group of advanced industrial nations whose upper classes draw vast tribute from Asia and Africa, with which they supported great masses of retainers no longer engaged in the staple industries of agriculture and manufacture, but keep in the performance of personal or minor industrial service under the control of new financial autocracy. It is collective imperialism. I'm going to just go over some of that because I'm not sure if I understood it. It was foreshadowed by Hobson in his critique of imperialism of European Federation of great powers, which so far from forwarding the cause of world civilization might introduce the gigantic peril of Western parasites, a group of advanced industrial nations. Okay, I'll just keep reading. So basically he's just saying that the whole of them are, collective imperialists. This is precisely what has happened. Competition between the monopolies has produced the phenomenon of vast advertising, the public relations organization which busy themselves selling not only goods and services, but personalities as well. These organizations and the media through which they operate, the press, radio, cinema, television, and the businesses dealing with the packaging of goods employ huge armies of people in what are nothing more than parasitic jobs which would have no place in a sane society, producing for consumption instead of profit. Yeah, okay. I mean, here you're really hearing his opinion about industrialized countries and the type of jobs that they employ, because they're not necessarily doing any of the, they're not, basically doing any of the basic works. They're extracting all of those resources from Africa, and then bringing in to do the manufacturing. But then you have this other stuff, the media and all this other stuff. Okay. As things are, enormous sums are invested and earned by the financial interests that participate in the promotion of these enterprises. Okay, we're almost finishing up, but we still have 9 minutes. So I'm going to try to. I'm not sure when this chapter ends, but we're going to keep reading up until the last few minutes. But this is only a tiny faucet of the fevered financial activity which is going on today in the capitalist world. Every week, every day, with almost monotonous. Okay, you can read it regularly. That's not even the right regularity. We see the same names repeating themselves as bidders for large companies, as underwriters and issuers of new shares, or holders of debentures, as combiners in new financial institutions for more universal methods of investment, as participants in new factories and ventures that will extend monopoly in fresh directions and more territories. The way he wrote a lot of this part right here, he's like he was writing in details and in facts and in he was going through it, and then here he was just like these. I mean, I feel like the tone of this part is like these motherfuckers. Like we just see their name coming back. You can just see them in these papers. They're the same bidders. These fucking parasites. Like, this is a tone that this part of the book is basically taking. They are especially industrious in the it's just done. Okay. They are especially industrious in the countries of the six and others which still hope to push into the common market as direct or associate members. The lowering of trade barriers was the signal for their entry. For practical purposes, some of the key European countries are financial servants of the dominant banking monopolist groups, the Morgans and the Rockefellers, despite all the power pertaining to such important banks as the Société Générale de Belgique, Banque de Bruxelles, Credit Banque Lambert, to such important industrial finance groups as Solvay, Boel, Brufina, Cofidis, Petrofina, Belgium, with its appendage, Luxembourg, is in reality a financial colony of American investment capital. 39 new companies were established in Belgium in 1959 by foreigners. In the year 1961, the number of new foreign companies set up had grown to 237. Sums invested from abroad had swollen from 2,457 million Belgian francs in 1959 to 6,664 million Belgian francs in 1961. Jesus Christ, that is just 2 years. Of this last figure, almost 60%, that is 3,979 million Belgian francs, was furnished from American sources. Henry Costin, in his revealing book on the ramifications of banking finance, L'Europa des Banquiers, declares that this enterprise is not limited to the territory of the kingdom and that the Belgium ex-colonies have not been ignored. One might even ask if the sanguinary events in the Congo were not caused by the merciless struggle going on between rival financial groups, he concludes. Okay. American finance capital, of course, had a field day in Germany during the post-war occupation. Of course, this was like candy time. Germany industry and finance, already linked to American industry and finance by cartel and trust arrangements, became even more heavily penetrated by the powerful United States monopoly groups. The giant German banks, Deutsche Bank, Dresdner Bank, Diskonto, Gesellschaft, Commerzbank, the mighty German Trust Group, Bayer, Badische, Anilin, and Soda Fabrik, Host, and Siemens are all strong to American capital and in many ways subordinate to it. Italian banks and industry are in much the same position. The Banco Commerciale Italiano, Banco di Roma, Mediobanco, Credito Italiano, all are in several ways tied up with American finance capital, either directly or indirectly. Examples can be stretched across the world to Japan, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. This financial dependence upon America has been put by Lord Barstead, chairman of M. Samuel and Company, at the 1963 annual meeting when he reported the 17% acquisition of the company's shares by the Morgan Group. We will not be the first merchant bank to have part of its capital owned by American interests. This is probably why in the first couple of chapters, Kwame warns Africa of American monopoly and finance because it was already happening. I could only imagine how much of it has expanded and grown and what it is today. So I'm going to do some research and I'll bring some information on Monday. So just to let you know real quick, actually, I'll just stop here. I will not be, I'm going to give myself a day off tomorrow. So the next day that I'll be streaming will be on Monday. And then again, we'll just continue the pattern moving forward. And hopefully that continues to work. But yes, our time is up for today. Thank you so much, Big Buddy, and anybody else that is on here for participating and being part of this learning experience. And have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And I will see you. Any chance you'd be down to share the Google Doc? I could. Yeah. The notes. Yes, I could. If you can, how would I be able to share it though? Yeah, I would need some additional information. So maybe if there's a way that you can send me a private message, because again, I don't know much about this platform yet. I'm still learning. If there is a way for you to do that, then I can definitely send it to you. Or you can send me your email and I can just send it to you from there and then I can just update you regularly. We'll see what works. We can discuss it after if we can. Just whisper me. Or if you have Discord. I don't have either. So I'll figure it out. Yes. Okay. So see you on Monday. If I haven't shared with you the notes by then, you can yell at me, but I'll try to figure out by then. Okay. Talk to you later. See you.